everybody. Welcome to HITRUST Secrets. I am one of your hosts, Susan Richards. I'm here with Donna Nodson, Jeff McHugh, also some of the core hosts of the program. And we've got Dennis Palmer from HITRUST and Patrick Kelly. And Patrick, remind me where you're based from.
Schneider Downs out of
Schneider
Pittsburgh.
Downs. Okay,
Schneider Downs, yeah.
perfect. Well, great. It's good to have everybody here. We've had a little bit of a break. Had the whole month. It felt like it flew by. So, but we're back and ready to tackle any questions, issues, concerns, good things, bad things. So, anybody have anything they want to start with?
So I'm going to double check and make sure it went live, but there should have been a high trust advisory that came out today that we're
Oh, okay.
turning on some updates to Report Center.
I saw it, yeah,
Um,
for access to
is it
reports,
is it
right?
is it out? Is it out?
It's out. Yep,
Okay,
it's out.
okay, awesome.
All right.
So
So, what is
um,
it?
yeah, so really quickly, so what Report Center does, we already have the functionality turned on, and what you're going to see over the coming months are some enhancements. It's really exciting. It's the right now the core functionality is when you build an assessment object in MyCSF, it automatically generates an entry, and you can track status of your assessment starting with answering tailoring factors or configuring assessment all the way up through final publication of your certification report.
Okay.
One of the updates that I believe they announced in this particular update, the update of the update, is that you will now be able to get the deliverable through my CSF Report Center so that you don't have to pull it down and email a PDF report over to relying entities.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that's at any stage, because that's actually a question that came up today is, what if somebody's in the process of getting recertified and they've got a client that or a prospective client that's like, hey, where's your high trust certification? And it's like it's in process. And obviously you don't want to say, yes, we're going to get high trust certified because it's been submitted and it's in QA. So you
Right.
can't promise that. But at the same time, you're kind of like, could I take a screenshot of the of where,
Mhm.
it's one of those you're like, I don't necessarily want to show you the back end and what it looks like, but at the same time, we're 90% confident that we're going to be good, and
Mhm. Mhm.
so this will be great to have that to be able to say, yes, it actually has
It,
been submitted.
well, the other thing I like about it from kind of looking at it from the relying party standpoint, not the assessed entity standpoint, but for the relying party standpoint is I'm going to the person who's going to issue your certification, and they are telling me that you have submitted to them, and here's where they're at,
Right.
right? So it takes any of the funny stuff out of the equation, and it's directly from High Trust that
Exactly.
they have submitted. And as soon as it goes into QA, there's a stage change, all the different, I don't know what, 15 or 17 stages, I don't know, maybe 30. We keep
Right.
adding them. Um,
Yeah.
but it's somewhere north of 10. Um, but it allows you to track through each of the stages of the assessment build and creation all the way up through certification, including
Mhm.
draft report published and certification published. It does include a certification date. It includes some scope details. It includes some factor details. So it's a
Nice.
very nice deliverable. And so if you have multiple assessments that you're tracking, um, the updates are going to allow one person to log in and see kind of a visual of the different reports that they're tracking
Oh, perfect. Well, yeah, as
from
soon
a,
as we're done with this session, I'm going to definitely let my client know that because we were just talking and I advised them, I said, well, maybe check with the third party assessor and see if they'll be willing to write a letter that says, yes, we submitted it, we've reviewed it. We're pretty confident because years ago, that's what, I had my assessor
yeah,
do
it
that.
it used to be
The assessor would
uh,
be like,
the
okay,
assessor letter. Yeah.
disinterested third party, this is we're pretty confident, but
Hmm.
it really did
Hmm.
happen, and so
Yeah.
now this will be great. I'll be able to let her know that she has
Yeah.
that power now at her fingertips.
Yeah, and like I said, it's as soon as you create the assessment object in MyCSF, the function turns on, and
Okay.
you have the option. Okay, the option.
Yes.
I know a
Yeah.
lot of people get worried about this. You have the option to share it with your relying parties.
Okay.
Um,
And it's not just when it's in third party assessment. I mean, it's very,
no, it
as soon as you create it, you're
as
saying,
soon as you create it, yes, ma'am.
okay,
Yeah.
nice.
And the other thing is, and a lot of people don't know this, like historically, if you have older assessments and you're getting recertified, you can go back to your old assessment. We turned it on for every object in my CSF,
Okay.
right? So it's historical. Now it'll show expired, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But it would show that it was completed and that at one point it was certified and
Right. That
expired.
and it
It
shows that
shows the
history
dates.
of, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
nice. That's really
yeah.
good. Excellent.
Um,
Well, good.
yeah,
Some good news to start July.
they did some really neat stuff on this. It's exciting.
Yeah. I like this from the validation perspective. It's just one, it's easier to, kind of organize and have that because the reports can be big, you know,
Mhm.
can be challenging to send through email. Um, and I also like the ability to get it directly from HITRUST. HITRUST is used more widely than it has been in the past. And with that type of use, almost always comes some shady characters. Uh, and so there are high trust is difficult and can be expensive. So there are absolutely going to be people who might be trying to represent themselves as high trust certified without having done the work. And that is something that, makes me apprehensive as
Mhm.
somebody who, dabbles both on the risk side and the high trust side.
Yeah.
My job is to be a little skeptical at almost all times.
Yeah, exactly. So the other comments that I have are just kind of from the reports perspective. There's like 2 or 3 reports that I use consistently at the assessment report by column, the HITRUST CSF compliance report, I think it is, which kind of shows the green, yellow, red to kind of, just gauge from a high level perspective, that I use throughout every stage of the assessment up until, submitting it into HITRUST and seeing it goes into that phase where it's like, hey, it looks like you're going to be certified provided, everything matches out and we agree with you. So I kind of use those as gauges, but one of the things that came up was some differences in corrective actions. And the philosophy that I know I've always subscribed to, and I think Donna, you've subscribed to it too, is you can combine corrective action plans for multiple controls. So that if you have 2 or 3 controls that are based on inventory of assets, that you don't necessarily have to have a corrective action for the inventory of assets to document licensing and backup schedules, and then a separate one because a different control is over owner or something like that. So
Right,
I've always
right.
subscribed to that. But this last time through this past month, the assessor was like, no, they recommended doing one corrective action plan per control that required it.
Mhm.
And they
And
said they thought that they were
it's a
hearing,
philosophical difference in how
okay,
you evaluate your corrective action plans and honestly your capability and your ability to get those corrective action plans completed on an R2 by the interim date.
okay,
So and that's where you'll see some of the difference in thought methodology, because you may have a particular corrective action plan that does cover multiple controls, but if you don't get that completed by the interim, then you're at risk because now you haven't made sufficient progress on closing out your required caps.
okay.
And so I could see it from both sides.
Okay. Because they were
Um,
under the impression that High Trust was going to come out with some guidance that said it definitely do it this way, that it's 1-for-1 caps to caps
I,
required. You're not hearing
I
anything
I
internally.
haven't
Okay.
seen anything, but I've got my ears on a lot of different walls.
Okay. Well, I figured if
So
anybody know, you would know.
Right.
normally I do.
Yeah.
Normally I hear about stuff like that. I haven't seen anything, but
Okay.
I'll definitely keep an ear out. I may
Okay.
pop in our QA rep
Oh, perfect.
and
Yeah.
ask her and see
Okay.
if she's had any kind of
Inklings of,
inklings of guidance either way.
Yeah.
okay.
I hope not, because there are definitely projects that would just be, I mean, it would be ridiculously redundant to have to separate out. You'd have, you could have 4 or 5 at least identical
Right.
apps.
Right. I think
Yeah.
access
You know,
control. I
just
mean, if
one
you,
tap
Well,
leads
yeah,
to 4 or 5
you have
different controls.
you have one particular technology area where you're weak, and you have 9 corrective actions for the 2 things that need to be fixed.
right.
Mhm. Yeah.
When
I
it
mean,
comes right down to it, it's 2 things.
Right.
You turn on Intune and you cover blanket 1 through 4, and then 5 through 9 with another application, right? And here's the thing, from the HITRUST perspective, as a general rule, we don't tell organizations how to run their security program, right? That's why you see a lot of variance in policy versus directive versus other types of guidance, because we know all organizations are different, and some organizations work better some ways and some organizations work better the other. What we're looking at is final results. And that's why I say it's a philosophical difference in how you evaluate your corrective actions and what you can get completed.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing, speaking to corrective action plans that you may start seeing more of is one of the capabilities is to have stages in your corrective action plan. And so building out milestones within each of the corrective action plans would still keep you in phase, in check with your plan, and allow you to address multiple sub pieces of a corrective action plan with one corrective action.
Okay.
So,
Nice.
but like I said, it's, as a general rule, I haven't seen that we would give direction on you have to have a 1-for-1.
Yeah, I mean, this was, and of course, an assessor's never going to go, you have to, they're going to be like, well, best practice is. And so I was like, you know what, I'm not going to swim upstream, you.
Yeah, and in some cases, it may be more efficient for them to replicate out 2 or 3 and change 2 words on it. That may be the right option for them.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, I'm always looking for the patterns, like, so if there's some that are, software development life cycle, it's like, well, that's one group handling that. I'd rather have one corrective action plan that says, okay, do these 5 things, and it'll hit these 3 controls that were. And the other thing for me is I also want to maybe do the gaps as well. So yeah, they're not caps this time around, but to be looking at those as well and saying, oh, if you just add this, this one thing, then you've changed that from a procedure that's not there. Or if maybe you don't have a procedure, a written procedure, and it's like, well, you've got 3 controls that require caps for that, but you can also get 2 gaps filled by adding these couple more things into that. So
yeah.
I like it from an efficiency perspective, being able to just, because I've had cases where it's like, I'm pulling, so bear with me, but implemented improvements on automated notifications, and that's hit several different caps, but they don't need separate projects for that. They just need one project. It is one project, and being able to look at all your caps and know without having to match them up or do it manually on the side, that all of those are the same, is helpful. And I would just put forth, and Dennis, I'm sure you hear this a lot, HITRUST is complicated enough. Where we can gain efficiencies, it's very helpful for clients to go, oh, okay, HITRUST enables us to have efficiencies here, and then it's easier to take when HITRUST insists on things being split out, to go, okay, HITRUST has a reason for splitting this out. There is a meaningful material impact, and that needs to be split out. And then, folks who are, in my shoes or Susan's or Patrick's can help justify that on behalf of HITRUST, right? It's easier when it is a material or a meaningful difference.
Yeah. And Susan, it's interesting that the question you brought up, because as we were talking, I just remembered one thing. We have a capability in MyCSF to map the same corrective action plan to multiple requirements.
I know. That's what yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Like, especially like the inventory of assets, it was, hit 75% here and 75% there. And I was like,
Yeah.
well, instead of having to do two corrective actions to hit two things here and four things there, can't I just have corrective actions that show, okay, change, add these things to the inventory of asset description or
Yeah.
the
It's
factors in there. And the one thing I do like is the way that we structured the naming convention of each of the corrective actions was to include policy, process, or implemented into the name of it, which was
yeah.
exceedingly helpful coming back even 2 weeks later to go, now what needs to get changed here?
Yeah.
Because that corrective action, you can link to the requirement, but it's still not necessarily, you don't get a full picture in that corrective action that says, oh, here's what the scores were that
Mhm.
drove to that. Still have to manually go over and then look at the assessor comments to see, okay, of these 10 elements, here are the three they did not find, and so it was very helpful. So I was like, okay, I'm going to definitely keep that from now on, that we put in the name of whatever that corrective action, what needs to be included.
Yeah, and you find it's interesting because a lot of the questions I get from my newer subscribers, my newer customers, are always about, well, if I have a document named this, how do I know that it goes to something else? And it's like, you've got a couple options. You can either, rename the document or include a separate identifier like a control
Hmm.
reference or domain reference in the document name. You can Most people don't know this. You can actually rename a document in MyCSF. So you upload it as XYZ Alpha 6. When you load it into MyCSF, you literally just type in a different name. MyCSF doesn't care. It's a placeholder for the database,
Right.
right? Name it what you want. Well, it makes sense. Um,
I
but
don't like that because you can't track it offline, but I see your point.
well, like I said, there's always advantages and disadvantages to doing certain
Yeah.
things. The other option would be in the description field. Just put the name in the description field.
Mhm.
The same way that like one of the things that I show people how to do on our optimization sessions is, if they're using an offline repository, load load the placeholder name and map the placeholder name and then put the location in the description so that when you need to pull the document, like for live QA, you know where to go get it.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And that's very helpful for organizations that already have a good document repository function.
So Patrick, from a assessor perspective, are there any kind of things that you look for um, that help you with, commenting or uploading of evidence and things that we as readiness assessors are embedded with the clients can help with?
Yeah, so I mean, I can say that from my standpoint, we like to work offline as much as possible. So we will bulk upload a test plan that comes with previously mapped or includes document references already, and then we'll go ahead and upload those documents wherever. We work in field guides, so there are some
Hmm.
uh, advantages, right? It will pull in some documentation, but for the ones that are the one-offs, we upload and then we ensure that they match the title, right? So similar to what Donna was saying, for our organization, whatever's in my CSF, we also have an offline or separately documented within field guide copy of that. As far as making sure that I'm understanding your full question, as far as upload goes, I would just make sure that you're naming the documents where they're relevant, making sure that they have like a work paper reference, like 8.c.1, something that can map back to the BUID or whatever you choose to use as an identifier.
See, the problem with that, I find, like with, especially if you're using a central managed tool like Intune or something, there's
Hmm.
like four or five controls that the same screenshot works for all of those. And I've had clients where they'll make basically use the same screenshot and just call it five different things. And I'm like, just call it the, Intune
Yeah.
compliance policies, and then let me, map it
Yeah.
to the others, because otherwise it does feel like there's so much evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things is, like, as I'm creating policies for an organization, one of the things I noticed is that HITRUST is very specific with mapping the not just the requirement, but like all of the different evaluative elements within the requirement. So how do you, as an assessor, because I mean, you want the policies to be readable by human beings in who may not be technical in your organization. So do you find it helpful to see like the control reference in the actual paragraph of that policy, or is it better to have it like in a table at the end that non-technical people might ignore?
I mean, if you're gonna map that for me within every section, that'd be wonderful. But I would say you can keep it very broad
Okay.
policies. You can include the BYDs maybe that you're initially addressing within the policy at the top or
Okay.
within the bottom, as you said, Susan. But I find that policies, there's not as much wiggle room, but we're able to interpret policies a little bit more. Where you really need to be specific is with those procedures.
Okay.
We recommend, the procedures are not the prettiest, but I think that you break it down by those 1 through 9, 1 through 4, and then you can say this is specific, a sentence each. This is specifically how we're addressing those. That's how we've sort of seen the most effective procedures when it comes to mapping to HITRUST. Whereas, they more speak to HITRUST rather than, you wouldn't hand it over for training, I would say, but it's
Exactly.
more of
Yeah.
a procedure that is meant to address HITRUST assessment.
And it's interesting because one of the things that we used to see quite a bit in QA is organizations that have an existing run book or playbook or however they're doing their procedure documentation. They would actually just grab the control reference and put it in a table like Susan had mentioned,
Hmm.
either as an attachment or an addendum of some kind, and say this, addresses XYZ in HITRUST assessments. And a lot of
Right. But
times they,
then, and that was kind of where I'm wondering, say there is something that has 10 to 15 evaluative elements. Do you want to get to that granular level? Because it almost feels like you should have text that can be hidden and then be visible for the auditor, but then hidden for, when you print it to PDF, because it's almost reading like a legal document at that point where you're like, okay, let me just
Mhm.
ignore that codified, whatever.
and
And
and that's generally where we see it as an appendix or
okay.
a table separate from the document,
Okay.
where it would just be an enclosure. This document covers HITRUST, AICPA, and PCI. Control this.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would agree. I would say it's more important for it to be practical for the business than to be practical for HITRUST. Just be
Okay.
ready if it's not specifically mapped for your auditor to come back to you with questions, right? And that's
Yeah.
no harm, no foul. Hey, can you point me to where number 9 is addressed within this policy or procedure, right?
Okay.
It's additional maybe legwork through communication, but we also realize that it's quite a lift to be mapping everything within those policies and procedures.
Okay. Yeah. Good to know. Good to hear.
I'm gonna just highlight that this is one of the advantages of working with an assessor that comes in with an evidence request list, and 2, being consistent about working with that assessor. Finding an assessor who understands your organization and then can leverage, yes, okay, this is how your policies align with the evidence, this is how the evidence request list and the associated controls aligned with your policies last time. So we're gonna, kind of use that again as a starting point for this next time, and procedure is the same. There's advantages because when an assessor, and Patrick, you can jump in here because you probably know better than I do, but when an assessor starts working with a new client, they're doing a best guess.
Yeah.
If they come in with an evidence request list, they're doing a best guess about what types of policies and procedures they think you have based on industry standards. And it might be a little bit different. You might call them a slightly different name. You might have a couple of them combined, or fragmented out. So that's one of those things that it's really helpful to work with an assessor who has that evidence request list to start with, and then to be consistent. I'm not saying you have to stick, if your assessor is not working well with your organization, absolutely look at other areas. But once you have an assessor who is, working well with your organization, don't, and this is where sometimes leadership will get distracted, oh, this other assessor is, $1,000 cheaper. Okay, look at the bigger picture. I encourage you to look at the bigger picture. That $1,000 cheaper, if it doesn't come with an evidence request list, and you have to start from scratch with all awareness of how your organization runs, that's not saving you money. So just help leadership understand when they're looking at changing assessors that there's a lot more to it than price tag. Throwing it out there on behalf of all the assessors I work with.
Well, and Donna, it's interesting you bring that up, because one of the things that we talk about in our onboarding sessions is, if you have an existing working relationship with someone who already does HITRUST, you're halfway there, because you already know, and we've all been in this situation. You spend a lot of time face to face, or coordinating with your external assessor organization, both in the readiness and the validation phase. And when you already have that existing relationship, they know your systems, they know your organizational culture in some cases. It makes it so much easier to power through these things and get a good result for everybody.
Yeah, because I mean, one way or the other, you're going to put the work in. It's either at the very beginning when you have those scoping discussions, and they take the time to understand, are you an on-prem physical server location, or are you completely remote, software as a service, virtual servers, or serverless? And if provided they adjust their evidence request list accordingly, and it's not just, okay, here's 400 things and we'll take out 200 because they don't really apply. As long, one way or the other, you're going to put that work in. Either you're going to put that work in up front, and then your evidence efficiency will be great, as well as you're moving through HITRUST QA, or you're going to be lax, and then it's going to come up because HITRUST QA is going to be like, this isn't sufficient detail. I need better. So one way or the other, that work can't be ignored.
Yeah, I would agree. Just building off of Donna's point about a request list, that's a successful assessment comes from, having a request list that is meant to meet all of the standards, no matter whether you're E1, I1, R2. And another thing that you can do is, on your side, right, you're going through the first assessment. Not only will, knock on wood, you have a good assessor, that second year request list will be, spot on, no questions, properly mapped to your environment. But if you ask of your assessor to map, can you include a BUID in this request? And then you are able to organize on your side, okay, for BUID 1023, this is what we provided last year. Regardless if you're doing an E1 and E1 and E1, or if you're going up a level, right? Those BUIDs carry over from the E1 to the I1 to the R2. So you're able to leverage those previous requests, even if you are expanding other, aspects of the scope of the assessment. So you're able to not be looking at a fresh report moving from an E1 to an I1 or an I1 to an R2, what have you. So organization on your side, leveraging your auditor's organization.
And I would encourage not just the BUID, but also the CVID. So especially, were you going there too, Dennis?
That's what I was going to say. That depending on how you're doing it, the CVID can be more beneficial, especially if, like, we're on 11s now. As we go to 12, some of those BUIDs may transition a little bit, but the CVID, if it's the same testing, will remain the same, and it's a lot shorter. But
it also helps to see what the actual detail is, because sometimes you're so in the weeds that you get this request and you're thinking it's a system specific and it's actually more of an organizational or vice versa. You're looking at endpoints and they're really meaning something else. And so it's very helpful sometimes to go, what's the context of why they're asking for this? And so to have it linked to what those are, because there were times, that I was like, well, what exactly is this request looking to get? So that I
Right.
could make sure I was getting the evidence that matched and not just throwing something out hoping it was the right thing.
There is a dance of general what I'm asking for. I know what I'm asking for, but I have to be vague, And then once we get comfortable with your environment, we can ask for specifics. But yeah, absolutely having that to lean back on.
It is. And one of the reasons that as much as the CVID is helpful version to version, one of the advantages, to Patrick's point, is when you have the BUID, you can look at the control reference, and so you know what domain and what control you're looking at. And sometimes that can produce a different mindset of the type of evidence you're going to need to support the finding.
Yeah, what's the objective of the domain?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
No, very, very good point.
And I would
it's
refer
like
back
when
the SharePoint, session that I did, which Susan has posted on, how you're tracking internally, all the progress through an assessment. Because then that pulls in some of Patrick's suggestions, which are, if you're documenting it and saying this is what we've provided, and you can add a column in your SharePoint grid in your list. With notes on, if there was anything or any controls or evidence requests that were challenging, and then you figured out what the evidence should be, add a note. Don't go searching next time. Add a note. This is where we ended up finding this information. It was here. We just, there were 2 or 3 conversations that had to happen in order for us to figure that out. Add a note. And then at the end of your assessment, you can take down that page from public consumption. You don't have to delete it from SharePoint. So it can be in your history for reference the next time you do an assessment and you create your fresh page, with all your new bits. So then you can, work well with your assessor so that you're not putting the whole burden on them to go and search everything up. That'll help keep your future estimates where you want them to be, which is mainstream. If you put a huge labor burden on your assessor, they're going to remember that next time. So do some of the legwork yourself. Try to be efficient, try to be a good client, and documenting that is helpful. And then your team can reference it. And if you win the lottery and you go off to Fiji, you can rest assured that your team will have all the information they need, and nobody will be calling you while you're on a beach.
Well, that brings up an interesting question. Patrick, have you ever fired a client or wanted to fire a client? No names needed.
No, we haven't, but it does come up in next year's pricing. Let's put it that way. Right. If there is, if there's a burden of hours, then yeah, it absolutely affects that. But not often.
And in some of those cases, it's more of an education piece to help them understand, help me help you, that's one of the things we used to do in the military was, help them out or help them out, 2 options. We're either going to make you successful or we're going to find something else to do it that way. And it's, especially when you're working with those ongoing relationships with assessors, readiness partners, customers, HITRUST itself. One of the things that we have really put a lot of effort in is to making sure that the external assessor firms, the readiness firms, and our subscribers have the information they need to be successful. And I mean, you look at version 11. I mean, that was a huge shift in the way we looked at providing the people who are testing the controls and evidencing the controls to provide the information to us in a way that was more efficient, right? So there's a lot to be said about that.
And I will say,
it really is in the handbook.
The handbook.
It all is in the handbook.
Yeah, in client onboarding too, I think we sit down to make sure that it's a match, right? HITRUST is not something that you can just throw money at, throw time at. you need to be committed. So whenever we onboard with a client, we make sure that they understand the load. Oftentimes, if they're new to HITRUST, that includes a readiness. But if they're coming from another assessor, there is that level of comfort that they know what the lift is and that they know that they're ready for what the assessment ask is. That sets us up for success.
Yeah, it really does. Especially when you get those folks who are single-threaded, or there's maybe a smaller team than probably should be present for those types of functions. That's where the challenge comes in, because they're, in a lot of cases, they're looking to the external readiness partner or external assessor to take some of that workload. But yeah, that's it. Those are, it's interesting, because I do occasionally get the question through either support or through one of my customer success managers of, yeah, we want to do a different assessor this year. Can we do that? And it is allowed, but we generally have, I don't want to say a counseling session, but we generally have a conversation with them. It's like, look, we understand maybe you're looking for, better pricing, different feature set with your firm. I said, just understand, like Patrick said, is the fit right? Is there something that you could work with the assessor firm to maybe kind of smooth things out? It's not something that you want to take lightly, because it is a big shift in your organization to try to get the new firm familiar with your processes, your technology, things like that.
Because this is not like the outgoing assessor is going to be like, oh, here, let me do a dump out of field guide and help you out. They're going to be like, sorry.
That's where the internal organization, goes far.
It really does. It really does. Well, and honestly, knowing the capabilities in my CSF, that's one of the things that I work with, particularly on customers who are either transitioning, like Patrick said, transitioning from an E1 to an I1, or maybe a version or something, is understanding, utilizing the platform itself to leverage, what you have in place, so that you're not starting from scratch. You're not starting from ground zero and trying to build up. You take the existing work and just move it forward.
Excellent. All right. Anything else? Any other highlights, lowlights? I was going back to one of the things I was talking about, because I was kind of living in the reports earlier today, and because we were talking about corrective actions and kind of looking at, okay, why did this get this score? Because it's been a couple weeks. The assessor comments don't come through on like the assessment column, the assessment report, even the column one. Those are really the subscriber comments. Those are the organization's comments, not the assessor comments. There's one report that does have assessor comments that you can get, but it's not in a column format. It's kind of that old school. So it's not easy to separate out and say, well, I really only want to look at the assessor comments where we were less than 100%. And so there's really no easy way to slice and dice. And so just a boy, it would be nice if we if we had an assessor report that also was in column form. Because that would help.
Donna, write that over. Sorry. looking at one and saying the other's name. Susan,
okay.
Write that up and send it over to me.
Okay.
I was actually, I had a call about 2 hours ago where we talk about enhancements and improvements.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it would be a heavy lift, because you've got the data's there. It's just a matter of how it's showing up in the CSV or the Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, no, that's something we can definitely consider, because I've already told him I want a couple different things on my, like the administrative details and factors report. We're going to put the configuration and the versioning on that now. Yeah, no, nice. This is is right for him. You've got my email address.
Yes.
Use and abuse. Yeah.
Well, then you won't show up anymore, so I don't want to definitely do that. But
I'll still show up. But yeah, no, more than happy to take that and run it by the team and get some hours behind it.
Susan, is
Okay.
that for one of your own assessments? I would hope that your external assessor is walking you through those.
No, this was to go back to the corrective actions and just
Hmm.
kind of see, okay,
Understand
what
what the actual
pieces, yeah,
deficiency.
of
Yep.
these, evaluative elements, which pieces were missing. And so it was really a matter of, okay, well, right now we're just manually copying and pasting it out
Right.
of
Because it'll
there.
give you the score, but it won't necessarily say 4 through 6.
Here's why. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
As we are heading into the final segment of our session today, I would remind everybody who has not made reservations for the fall yet to get those booked. Some of my clients, you know who you are. But folks who have not made HITRUST reservations or gone to contract with their assessor, or folks like me and Susan who are going to be helping you through the assessments, make sure you get those booked because people do book up quickly. Those schedules get packed and there's only so much capacity. So please remember, if you are anticipating getting any certification from HITRUST in the second part of 2026 and you don't have your reservations or contracts in place, please make it a priority for July. You need to have these things done by the end of the month.
Yeah. Spot on.
And you can make a QA reservation up to a year, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And so now with the new reporting, if an interested entity is looking at, okay, have you created your assessment? What stage are you at? Go now even for next year, because, that way you're even more serious about, we're looking to get certified in Q1 or Q2 next year. Well, if they see a QA reservation date, that's kind of your, line in the sand as well. And you can keep changing it. I mean, you can, you're like, okay, well, I thought it was going to be February, but it's really going to be March. You have the option to keep, moving that, but there's no penalty to start now and kind of shoot for that date.
Right.
And that's a great milestone then to kind of put everybody in the company on notice that we're serious about this.
Susan, do me a favor
Yeah.
on your request. Ask for the reservation date to be visible in Report Center.
Okay.
Sorry to put that on you, but if I don't do
No.
it now, I won't remember it later. But that's a good idea.
Yeah, because that way it's not just, oh yeah, they're telling me this. It's, oh, they've committed
Yeah,
and they've
yeah.
Mhm.
I think the reservation date would be a good field to add to that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Why did we not think of that?
Well, that's what this is for. We just thought of it.
Exactly.
We
Yeah,
just
no, that's
crowdsourced
a great,
the report center.
yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, we'll put that in. I'll see if we
Perfect.
can get that added to the Report Center.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah,
Well, good.
because that way, not only would you have the submission status, you'd know when it's estimated to be submitted.
Right.
I have a current customer who I could use that with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I can't tell you anything, but
Right. But I mean, and it does
yeah,
lend itself more than just, your salesperson trying to say, yeah, we've got it, to be able to go, oh, okay, the
well,
team that's doing
it's
it has that in also. It's not
it
just
does
vaporware.
and especially when you look at, I know a lot of folks are contractually obligated to have certain things done by a certain time. That would really go a long way to helping those relying entities
Right.
understand, yes, we can expect this sometime after this date, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I think that would be good to see. I don't know. I don't know whether I'll get pushback on it or not, but I'm going to ask.
Okay. Oh, and to follow up, I remember I was telling you that one of the things we had reliance or inheritance on a company. It was Athena, and when you do the drop down right now, for the most part, you don't see Athena listed. And I remember I was saying how somehow it was like going to magically show up in the external inheritance. Well, it doesn't magically show up. They basically can turn on you seeing that visibility as one of the downstream partners of theirs. But before they did that, they wanted to know ahead of time which controls are you planning to inherit at what percentage. And so they wanted to kind of come to that agreement before they said, yes, okay, now you are a customer of ours. This assessment does pertain to you. Whereas, a lot of them, like the big ones like Microsoft and Google, and they just kind of go, hey, you figure out if you're our customer or not. And this was, more deliberative and thoughtful, but it was not that score just magically showed up in the inheritance section. It was that showed up in the drop down, and then we were able to use that for inheritance. So it was still a manual process to go do that, but
I can tell you if I had unlimited dev hours, inheritance would look very different. But well, so one of the things that at some point I'd like to see is you provide your inheritance partners as part of the tailoring. So you go in, like right now we have third-party providers as available option, right? So kind of the next phase of that is you put in your inheritance provider, and then my CSF goes through and says, okay, these are the controls that are available for inheritance.
Mhm.
And there's a flag by it. And you say, this has inheritance available. Do you want it? Right. We have the SRM. We have everything we need. It's not an easy fix.
Right.
But I would
Well,
love
and
to
it
see
also is
that.
timing wise because you may be looking at this assessment now while you're kind of doing your preliminary, and then it's, you have to be with 30 days before field work is the maximum you can be on that. So there would still be a timing issue as far as when you would start looking at that.
So one of the things with Report Center that we are looking at is tying follow-on certifications so that if you have the link to, say, the 2026 assessment and the 2027 comes out, right, that there would be a traceability between the 2026 and the 2027. And like I said, if I had unlimited dev hours, it would be a very different equation.
Mhm.
But that is one of the things that we've looked at is helping organizations who are maybe within the last 3 months of a relying party's certification or a
Mhm.
provider certification, and then they go to get it, and it's like it's not there anymore, right?
Yes.
It's the cert
Yeah.
expired 12 days ago, and it's in QA, but it's not published yet, right? So how do we
Yeah.
address that?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other thing is, when you're doing, maybe version 11.8 and somebody's on version 9.6, there's controls that aren't there. And so, you may be
But
like, oh, well, I have to rely on that. I have to inherit that, but there's nothing there to inherit. And they may or may not let you see their HITRUST report or a SOC 2 or something like that. And so you're kind of like, okay, well,
the
how do I rely?
the direct ones will be there through the CVID. The CVID actually covers those.
Okay.
The challenge is if the evaluative elements change, the CVID won't match.
Hmm.
Yeah, but the CVID is actually specifically designed to address that. It's a cross-version identifier.
Okay.
And so from 9 to 11, we did it so it wouldn't break inheritance. That's why that identifier exists, is so like a person doing an R2 on, 11.3 and their provider did an R2 on 9.6, any of those that carried across, the CVID will pull forward.
Right,
Because
but there may be new controls
yeah,
that you also are still having to inherit from them, but they just were never evaluated because 9.6 didn't have that.
right.
Mhm.
And that's where the different CVID BUID pair comes in.
Right. But if you knew that they were already in process, and that's, I think what you're talking about was, okay, well, by the time you're ready to submit, this will already be there. So we can hopefully
Yeah.
get you on that.
And
But
and that's one of the reasons that, specifically, like I told you, I'd ask for versioning on some of the analytics. I may That's actually I may throw that into the report center to see if we can get versioning turned on early. I'll have to go look and see whether it's included right now.
okay.
It may already be in there, but if not, I will ask for that.
Yeah, because that would be, I mean, if you you're trying to do it 30 days before your 90-day field work starts, and it would be better for you to wait until 30 days into your field work to do it, because that would be the newer one. That would definitely help with that as well, because you'd be like, oh, okay, well, instead of me trying to do this on a 9.6, let me see. But conversely, also, well, that maybe they're not going for it, and I need to get this on the 9.6 because it's
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
expire.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I haven't had that happen yet, but I definitely encourage my clients to make sure they're submitting their inheritance at the beginning of an assessment stage. One, so they understand where the inheritance is potentially applicable. And two, they can get the responses back from the vendors so they know for certain where they can count
Right.
that. And that takes a hot minute. So, if their version changes or if their certification expires and then re-ups during that process, that certainly would be a lot of extra rework. I don't know exactly how to avoid that, but Dennis, you sound like you're onto something. So
I got a few ideas.
Other than going off years for the whoever your partners are.
Yeah.
Wait till 2027 for the 2026 to be done, but that sometimes isn't
Yeah.
feasible.
Yeah, that's always fun challenges to address.
yeah. Well, should we wrap this up? We're just
Yeah.
shy of the hour. It's
Yeah.
been
Oh,
great
wow.
catching up with everybody. I hope
It has
everybody's
been.
summer is going
It
well.
has. It has.
Yep. And we'll be back next week.
Sounds good.
All right.
See you,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
all.
Everybody.